My name is Jabari Hayes. I'm the proud father to a 7th grade honor roll student. I'm the husband to a beautiful inside and out wife. I'm a caretaker to my father who has Parkinson's. I'm the fortunate son of a mother who has 18 years clean from crack cocaine and alcoholism. I'm a business partner in a collision center in Atlanta, Georgia. Allegedly, I was a member of Black Mafia family and trafficked thousands of kilos of cocaine across America. This corner right here on Baltic and Hoyt, like when you came home from school and you had your band instrument, the dudes used to hustle the kids like, yo, shorty, let me hear you play something. Dude get out with a sax, he play something, they give him a pass. They were like trolls. Dude come home with a drum, I came home with an oboe. So I had to either fight or be fast. And I was lucky I was fast.
In the 1970s, the drug of choice among the American public was powder cocaine. However, in the 1980s, drug dealers began to convert powder cocaine into crack. By 1984, crack had spread through America like a wildfire. No area was more affected by the crack epidemic than New York City. In the boroughs of Manhattan, the Bronx, Queens, and Brooklyn, crack cocaine took over entire sections of New York's low-income communities. Crack offered a longer high and was cheaper to purchase, causing thousands of people to become addicted seemingly overnight. No one saw this epidemic coming, especially not the children of the parents who were sucked in by this addictive narcotic. One of those children was Jabari Hayes. Jabari was born in Brooklyn, New York on November 16, 1972, to Lorraine Hannah and Mike Hayes. Jabari has an older brother, Jerry, from his mother's previous marriage. Not long after Jabari was born, his parents separated due to irreconcilable differences. Initially, Jabari's father did not know the condition in which his sons were living in.
The name of the projects I grew up in is Gowanus Projects in Brooklyn, New York, specifically downtown Brooklyn. Life in Gowanus Projects was like living in a war zone. You always had to be prepared, and in war zones, when you see people get killed, you see people get stabbed, you see people get shot, you see people get stomped out, you see people get beat upside the head with lead pipes. It's just a regular day in the projects.
The last place I lived in Brooklyn was in these projects. I left from here to Manhattan in Gowanus Projects. I left from right here, then I went because, you know, the ordeal with living down here with her, with the drugs was just too much, so I had to make a move.
When you pan and you look at the projects, these projects are anywhere from 4 to 25 or more stories. Same bricks, kind of same windows, a little different, but on every one of these windows, there's bars. When you go to the Upper East Side or West Side, when there's a condo, could be the same building. There's no bars. What's the difference? And the doors that you hear in the projects, in prison, you've got to go through one big door because you're trying to keep people in and stop people from going out. And then you just go through a series of doors. When you first go in the projects, you go in the first big door. It's a big, heavy steel gauge door. And then you go through another door. If you walk up the steps, you go through another door. When you go to your project apartment, you go through another big, heavy steel door. And it's the same prison mentality. It's like you're preparing people from the projects so when they do go to prison, that it'll be normal for them. The crack epidemic affected people and myself and my family and the rest of my family that didn't live here. It was the scourge of the earth. It was worse than for all people. It didn't matter if you were Black, Latino, or if you were West Indian. It was the scourge of the earth, and crack basically decimated almost every family that lived in these projects. it was no rules. Nobody cared, because to get beamed up for Scotty, it didn't matter what was in your way, you would get that hit. It was different from heroin. At least when people got on heroin, they nodded out. They nodded out and they would go fiending for it, but crack was all day, all night till they collapsed. And when they got back up, they were on a mission. They were on a mission to get beamed up to Scotty every second of their life.
You know, we did a lot of little things that normal kids would do, but then on the same note, we would go home and had to deal with that ordeal with, like, you know, 12, 13 years old, and your mom's is smoking crack and the house is full of people, and meanwhile, earlier you was at football practice or you was at school, and you gotta go into the house to a whole nother different world, and it's 24/7, and it's 7 days a week. No, it's 9 days a week, and it's 30 hours a day, and it never stops.
We had food on the table before crack. My mother would go up to the school. If there was an issue, she would make meetings before crack. My mother never stole my money before crack.
I didn't need television. I lived it. And then my mother was always candid and always upfront and always straightforward. And she told you, look, this is what I'm doing. Either I'm smoking crack, either you like it, accept it or reject it, or move on.
When your mother is on crack, she's not worried about if you've got clean underwear on, if you ate today, what you're doing at school, if you brought a gun home. She's not worried about if you stole a bike. Crack is primary for everything in her life. As I walked home, I knew crack was everywhere around me because I could see people fiending. I could see the crack vials, the red tops, the black tops, the blue tops, the dudes leaned up against the fence, all on the basketball courts, on the handball courts. You can see the rocks. And I had to go through those doors, and kids were playing, but your mind was someplace else. What I was thinking was, who's in the house? How long am I gonna have to wait to get in the house? And what's going down? Like, is mommy home? Did mommy get busted? Did mommy get arrested? Where is she at? What is she doing? Can I not come in the house because they're not opening the door because there's bullet holes in the door because somebody done shot up the house, so we're not coming home? I can't even come home to my own house?
The beginning of them 80s was really rough, you know, and I had to put my children with my mother. I had to run from the place of comfort that I lived, and I just ran into all different types of snares and traps.
Before crack, my mother would never let people in the house. When crack came, everybody was in the house. We had a booming crack house here. You know, drugs are communalistic. People want to get high with other people that get high. And every day, it wasn't a day that went by that somebody wasn't getting high in my house.
The people I hung out with, they all got high, and so did I. So in that project, I let anybody that got high come in there and do whatever they need to do for all of us just to continue that insanity.
You know, my biggest thing is why it has to be my mother. I don't give a fuck about anybody else. It could be anybody else's mom, but why mine? You know, why she gotta smoke every day, all day? Why I gotta come home to a crack spot? Why I gotta come home to 30 people? I gotta come home to people in the bathroom, people in my room, people sitting on the beds, people sitting on the floor.
I would hang out all times of night, because who wants to stay in a crack house? I could hear people inside of the house when I'm out there, and I still kick on the door because I lived there. That was my house. I don't care if they were smoking crack, that was my house. I'd put my key in the door and the chain would be on, or the lock from only inside. Boom, 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 open up, open up, open up. My mother would do the craziest thing. I guess it was her last thread of dignity. She'd be like, what you want? So I want to come home. So she'd open the door and she'd put my hands over her eyes, over my eyes, and she would escort me to her room, my room, and I never understood it, because I could smell the butane lighter and the crack pipe when it, and I could hear the sizzle of the crack cocaine when they were lighting it up and smoking it. She walked me to my room, and I'd stay in my room. I couldn't come out the room because I guess she felt like, even if I'm smoking crack, I still don't want my child to see me smoking crack.
He used to scream in the hallway, paper, like he was a paper boy. And I had company in the house. We was trying to get high. And I said, everybody put everything up. But they wasn't going, they got their stuff up because they already took their hit and had their drink, and I couldn't get mine. And when he walked in the door, I slapped him. That was the worst, that was one of the bottoms for me. It was one of the worst times of my life, slapping him in his face like that for nothing.
Tupac said, you know, even as a crack fiend, you're a queen. And even when my mother was wrong, it didn't matter, she was always right. So if she was stealing, we were stealing. And even still to this day, if you think you're gonna do something to her in any magnitude, that's not gonna happen. So we defended her, yeah. You know, we had situations, I'm not proud of that. We had situations where we went in the store when she was shoplifting. We called it, you know, slang term boosting.
Violence was fun for us. That's all we did. We practiced it every day because we had to be prepared for the streets. In the projects, you can't be weak.
My mother would keep walking because we was all trained and drilled. And as he's going low, I would come with the tomahawk high, and then we would cuff the guy. And then by the time he realized it, me and Jabari was down the block because we were lightning fast. We were gone. And my mother was gone, and it just looked like some kids were playing around, harassing, you know, fucking with the security. And then that's that. And little did they know that, you know, my mother had half the store in her girdle or her bag or whatever the case may be, and we, you know, he tried to stop her and we dealt with him.
I can remember waiting outside of that store, understanding that mommy's fucking coming home tonight, and it didn't matter what security guard, who it was, how big, how tall, how strong, we were gonna do whatever we had to do to wreck him so that my mother can come home.
Eventually, Jabari's father had had enough. He decided to remove the boys from the awful environment in an attempt to give them a better quality of life.
I was caught up in the grips. I couldn't do nothing about it. Well, actually, I didn't want to do anything about it because I knew it was better for him to take him someplace so he can live normally than to be there with me and my insanity. But he wanted to take my oldest son, but he wouldn't go. He stayed right there with me. And he went through some insane stuff.
Jabari went to St. Louis because his father, we have different fathers, sent him to his family out there. There was nowhere else to send me, so I stayed.
Going into his freshman year of high school, Jabari traveled over 900 miles from New York City to St. Louis, Missouri, where he would come to live with his grandmother and his aunts.
When you're used to certain kind of people, even though you go to a better environment, my best friends were the toughest, roughest, say anything, do anything, ready to fight at the drop of a hat. Those were my best friends.
When I first became familiar with who Jabari Hayes was, I was a freshman in high school, and he was a sophomore, and he was from New York, so he was different, so everybody knew who he was. I remember him hanging out with a crew of guys that were very, first of all, it was an odd mix of guys.
Jabari had this group of wild guys. It was Stephon Williams, Jermaine Andre, and anybody else they picked up.
Jabari was very nice. And that's what we say, when I say I don't want to call him a kiss ass, you know what I'm saying? Because we were still kind of, you know, knuckleheads. You know, he wasn't on that knucklehead shit. He was very polite, very nice, polite to everybody, but you could still tell he had something about him that he wasn't no punk.
He didn't, even though you thought like these guys know everybody, these guys are popular, like he would talk to anybody, be friends with anybody. Like he was good like that.
And Jabari was smart. He didn't get into stupid stuff. You know, we get into stupid stuff. He always kind of steered away from it. You know, he wasn't hanging with us on those nights.
The first time I met Jabari Hayes, he had applied for PAL's class. And a lot of people said, you don't want him. He's not a good kid. He had applied. I overrode everybody else and we accepted him into the class. First time I met him, I liked him. He had a warm smile. He had a lot of enthusiasm for life. And he was funny, he was bright, and I just knew that there was potential there.
In PALS, we share like life stories, and it's basically peer counseling inside the class as well. When you're sharing, you become closer because you're sharing. And people would cry and all of that. The first time I ever, and only time I ever cried in that class is when Jabari shared his story about his mom's, drug problem and him and how he would respond to those situations.
Issues that other teachers saw was that he had trouble focusing. being quiet. He was a little bit too exuberant, too enthusiastic. He was always respectful, so I didn't ever see that as an issue with them. But I think they just wanted quieter, more malleable and students.
I remember going off to college. I started off at Central Missouri State, and Jabari and another friend, Andre, they stayed home. And I remember always coming home, and when I came home, I hung out with them. And when I came back home to go to school, they left and moved to Atlanta.
After high school and a brief time at community college where he was a standout sprinter, Jabari landed himself a track and field scholarship to the prestigious Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia.
I was really very pleased with that and very proud that he had even tried.
Jabari came to Morehouse on a college visit, and you know, we was very excited about Jabari because he was a person of a lot of interest. You know, he had a lot of energy, and what I seen that he was a young man that had a lot of potential. Not the potential to be the greatest runner in the world, but a young man who could help a lot of the young men that was here at Morehouse.
When I first came on my recruit visit, a lot of the schools recruited me to run track, but they recruited me to run track. Morehouse recruited me because they believe I had something to give, and Morehouse wanted me here because they wanted to build men. And out of every coach, Coach Hill was the only coach who didn't talk about track. He talked about being a man, being accountable for yourself and your community.
When I first met Jabari, literally, you know, it's like somebody new coming in, right? And you look at these cats and you try to find out, you know, is this a character or is this somebody, you know, whom really gonna be down for what we're here for?
Jabari understood some things about life. He did understand about wrong and right. So that means Jabari had a chance.
He was real instrumental in me coming to Atlanta and running for Clark Atlanta, because he politicked with the coach, and he, you know, would take my times over to the coach and let him know what I was doing, tell him who I was and talking me up. And so he got me. I got a scholarship, you know. It was partial, but it was money to Clark, basically because he did that.
Some students today feel that, hey, I am privileged. But, you know, Jabari, you know, wasn't like that. You know, he knew that life was something he needed to take control of, you know, but he was going about it in the wrong way.
Track gave me a purpose. It gave me something every day that I could take all of my aggression out on through lifting weights, through running, whether it was throwing up or almost passing out from mileage or sprint workouts. It gave me that team, that bond, that camaraderie, that brotherhood with my teammates that are still my friends today.
I got here and didn't have anywhere to stay because my apartment wasn't ready. So he was in New York when I arrived, and he had a place that was set aside for him to stay on Morehouse's campus, a school I ain't even go to. And I came in and I crashed there until he got here, and even a little bit after.
This brotherhood that Morehouse has, no other school has it. No other place in the world is like that. There's no other school in the world that is predominantly black men, all college educated, all trying to do the right thing. One
thing I try to have is the ears and eyes that are out there looking over these young men, and it was about, you know, alcohol and stuff, being around people that was getting high, being around people that was doing some things they didn't need to be doing, as far as selling items that they didn't need to be selling.
Such as?
Just such as marijuana.
Also in Atlanta was Jabari's older cousin, Quentin, known on the streets as Q. Hugh made a name for himself in St. Louis's underworld by allegedly selling high-grade cocaine.
He used to come to one of the restaurants that one of the nicer restaurants that we used to work at, and he would come in driving Porsches and stuff and tipping us $20, and he started taking us out. He would take us out and take us to strip clubs mostly and pay for everything.
And he never really forced his way into this situation. I think he just looked at it as if it was the only means at that time for him to make money, and he was real trustworthy at the time, so it was easy for everybody to trust him.
I mean, we knew that he was a drug dealer, but it's so weird, like how different people could be different. Like obviously he was doing things that were not good, but all we ever saw was this dude that loved to crack jokes and have fun, and show up in exotic cars with different women.
No, the position was quick, and the position was on point, approaching him, letting him know why we brought him here, letting him know that, it's not going to be tolerated.
Before long, Jabari had to find a way to explain the money he was making. So utilizing his passion for cars, he started working for a local valet company and brought a few friends along with him. For the moment, the money Jabari was making seemed legit.
The point that I seen, he made sure he covered his back and he didn't let anybody find out what was going on with his personal life.
The interesting thing about the whole valet situation is that we worked at a company that all the black guys that worked at the company were us, all our friends. But what we did know is they had a lot of accounts, and we didn't get the good accounts. In fact, some of the accounts that weren't so great, when we started working them, we made them money-making accounts. I think that I know Jabari and some of the guys felt like, we were kind of getting shafted. Jabari and two of my other friends decided to start their own valet company.
Someone says, hey, how's Jabari? He got this valet company, it's awesome. I'm thinking it's amazing. Now granted, looking, you see he had the S-Class Mercedes during this time, and and we had friends that thought he got an S-Class Mercedes because he had his valet company and he had all these different accounts.
One of the first businesses Jabari had was the valet parking that I recall. And with that, you just figured that, wow, I never knew valet parking can do what it was doing for Jabari, for anybody. I was like, he's making some money doing that. Those contracts is, must be really nice. So for me, in the beginning, it was about, that's what it is, and then, out of that, it was the limousine services. And then I was like, okay, he really doing it now.
It was a night, I was at this club called The Industry doing a limousine job. And I saw my homeboy. And my homeboy, he saw the limo, he saw me. We dapped up and he was like, hey man, I might have something for you. Call me. So he gave me his number. I knew what it was. I knew what the call meant. It was that time. So I waited a little bit. I kept contemplating it, like I had a valet business that was doing good and a limousine business that was doing good. Plus I was doing what I always loved, coaching kids in high school, track and field. And then I made the call.
By the end of the phone call, Jabari was invited to meet with some of the members of the notorious group Black Mafia family, prominently known as BMF, led by Demetrius Big Meech Flannery and his brother Terry. BMF was the largest African-American drug cartel in the country. Jabari would soon be hired to transport millions of dollars in cash and cocaine across the country.
J-Boy sent him down to, where was I, in Dallas. They had sent him down there. And around that time, this is the first time we met, he pulled up in a limo and he was, dressed like a limo driver would be dressed. So my first interpretation of him was he was kind of a square compared to what we would usually see on a daily basis.
You got to see how he'll adapt to his coworkers. So that was a screening for Jabari. He come in there suited and booted. People looking at him like, man, y'all sure this the right dude for the job? But the whole persona told, he had the right persona about it. He come in with the dress shirt, the full length wool jacket and all this here. So the biscuits, I guess, what they call the shoes, the hard bottoms. So I'm looking at him like, man, where the hell they done hired this dude from? Where he come from? What the hell he about to do? But he was the right man for the job.
It never crossed my mind before that Jabari would get involved in an organization like that. I always thought he was the one out of all of us that was gonna go straight, that was gonna go the right way. I never saw anything like that, just because of his personality.
Whoa, you got a new car now. It's 300Z, mustard and black. I was like, sweet, right? I just asked him, I said, help a brother out, man. I need some side gig or whatever. I remember the day, we walked off the track, and he said, at the time walking up to me, he said, come here, let me talk to you for a second. And he just flat out asked me, he said, can you do 25 to life? My total face just like, nah, bro. I can't do 25 to life. He said, then you don't want to do what I'm doing.
I mean, he was fascinated with that because that's the life that we grew up with. We grew up in a crack spot. We sold drugs. I brought him around people who sold drugs. Then I guess he figured it was his turn to return the favor, but at a bigger scale. I guess I could say he one-upped me, because we was teenagers and I was doing it big, but when we were young adults, they were doing it like astronomical, numbers that we couldn't even foresee, like $1 million a day. So I've never seen anything to that magnitude.
I personally think, and always have, that one of the biggest reasons why Jabari ended up dealing with the BMF is because it was just too perfect. Like, these guys were innovating what they were, like the drug trade in America. And so they were moving large amounts. And so when you do that, like, you gotta guys have to drive this stuff. And all the guys that I ever met associated with them, you know what they look like? Drug dealers. And Jabari did not. Like, they called him, they called us college boys and they called him nerd but somebody smart said, yeah, he's a nerd and that's what we need. We need somebody who can drive and not look suspicious. And if he does get pulled over, guess what? He speaks like he's got a college degree. And that's what we need.
I think the BMF what was attractive to him was definitely the brotherhood, the loyalty, which is like we were with our crew. True loyalty doesn't know the law. That's how it goes. You my boy, somebody do something to you, I'm coming to help you. I don't care about whether it's against the law or not. So I think he saw that loyalty there and he saw an opportunity to better his future.
You have billionaires who still want more. So it's the nature of a human being. It's the nature of a human being to always strive to want more. So for me, in that dynamic, listening or hearing one of the people that I know, that I care about, tell me, this is what I'm doing, in so many words. I understood it.
Probably the thing that I liked the most or loved the most was the brotherhood. The brotherhood and the invincibility that I felt and that we all felt. You've got 100 men that are ready to die for you is intoxicating.
There was a point when Jabari I don't know if there was a conversation where he just said, hey, I'm doing this, but he didn't. It was a point where he just wasn't hiding it. Like, he was like, this is what I'm doing. And I believe that he did that so that Like, it's not, so now at that point you're choosing to be around him or not.
When I first started making money with BMF, I said, I'm not going broke like all of these other people that I saw. I was just on save mode, save mode, save mode. And Meech pulled me to the side and said, hey, you living in a $700 a month apartment and you've got 4 cars outside. You can't throw it in these people's faces, man. Buy you a house, get you something nice. You didn't work hard. You didn't risk your life and your freedom to live in a $700 apartment. I bought a $330,000 house on 2.66 acres, 6,300 square feet out in the country, so that when the robber boys came, they wouldn't be able to find me. When everybody else was buying $1 million houses, I was like, I'm not spending all of my money. In the beginning, I thought it could end at any day. At that time, I thought, you know, nothing lasts forever in the beginning. And then as time went on and more money was made, everything went out the door. It didn't matter. It was Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and rewind every day. Anything and everything you could think of, you had. Going to bed and waking up early, even though you only got 3 hours worth of sleep, because you could go in the Gucci store and buy out the store. Whatever money could afford, and you wanted it, that's what it felt like in BMF.
You started to see like places that he would go, or you know what kind of, you know, how much he would spend on dinner, or you know, and then take you out. Like, you know, we've been friends for a long time, and yeah, we paid for a lot of things for each other because I didn't have money or he didn't have money. But then when he couldn't just pay for everything, it is a red flag, so to speak. Everybody kind of heard of the BMF, and then all of a sudden you're like in the VIP with them. So then it's like you kind of know, like on some level you just know.
You know, anytime a hot brand new car come out, it could be the Hummer, 300Z, whatever it was, Jabari had it. You know, and it was nice.
A typical night out with BMF would probably start at the White House or would start from Justin's restaurant in Buckhead.
The attention would mainly be on us because at that time it wasn't a lot of bottles being bought, it wasn't a lot of jewelry being worn, so the attention was easy to be grabbed, and we grabbed it.
Every day is a party, so you know a Monday night could turn into a Magic City Monday. So you know how that is. You got money at your will, countless amount of money. You got ladies, just, you name it, it's done. The American life. Coming from a hustler point of view, you know, it's American life.
We were at a concert for one of the guys that my partner managed. And I think we might have been, you know, we were out of state somewhere. And only so many people could get in. They were talking about this crew was coming. And they were saying security needs to stop, and they said, you can't. It's like 100 of them or something. And they said that name, the Black Mafia family. And I was just thinking how, you know, man, would nobody ever roll up on my place talking about, you know, that we have to let them in. And I looked up and there's all these cars rolled up, you know, I was like, wow, you wouldn't be able to stop them.
Every club that we went to, if you were the VIP there, when we came, you became a regular, just like a regular patron of that club, because we took over the club.
We've had $20,000 nights, we've had $50,000 nights, we've had $100,000 nights. It just depends on the situation and the party itself.
They loved us for that, and they hated us because if anything popped off, it was going bad.
He threw a sly comment about a pharmaceutical salesman. And I go, oh shit, he's saying he's a pharmaceutical salesman in front of Andre's mother? But at that time, he was so confident in the world that he was in that it would never end. He felt like that time he was invincible.
He started to sort of, as far as in the money sense, he started to kind of act like all the drug dealers that we knew.
By all accounts, life for Jabari was going well. He seemed to have it all, except someone to share it with.
I met my ex-wife when I was in the Atlanta University Center, the colleges in Atlanta. And what I liked about her was she was just a regular. She was just a student. She was trying to get her grades so she could do something better with her life. She wasn't out there. She didn't want my money. She didn't care about my car. She was happy with the little Hyundai Elantra that she had at the time. Her family wasn't pushing her to be with me because I had money. She was just a regular girl who didn't know anything about anybody, that didn't know me, from just a guy that met her while she was walking down the street.
Jabari immediately fell for the college beauty, and if he wasn't doing runs for BMF, he was spending every minute he could with a new woman in his life.
No matter what we were doing, how great of a time we were having, how bad of a time we were having, always had at least 2 phones, no more than 4 or 5 phones, but one phone was dedicated to the mob. And when that phone rang, everything stopped. If we were arguing, argument was cease and desist. Once I got that call, wherever I was at, I was getting home or I was getting everything I needed. If I was in a city, I would buy a new bag, I'd buy new clothes, I'd buy new everything to create the profile of a limo driver. There was never any goodbyes. It was, I'll see you later. It was never any tears in front of each other. And it was like she was sending me off to war and I was ready. I'd drive myself or I'd have somebody drive me that I trusted, usually my brother or my ex-wife. A lot of people think that drug deals, big drug deals, go down in some dark alley or underneath some barely lit bridge near a train track, near a river. But they happen in, you know, quaint multi-million-dollar or $800,000 houses. You know, you can't expose yourself and you've got 100 bricks of cocaine in some squared off bag and you're passing it. It looks too obvious. So you do it right underneath their noses in quaint houses like this. This is a house we called the Club Kitchen. We loved this house because everything was centered around the kitchen. It had a pool in the backyard. This is one of our favorite places because the elements that we needed a house that was relatively close off the highway, wasn't too many twists and turns, a place where we could have a whole bunch of parking like on this cul-de-sac, and a place where we could blend in. When I would get to the house or whatever business that we were working out of, it was everything rides on me. I'm the one who straps the whole team, all of the mob on my back. All of the mob's money is in this car. All of the mob's work, drugs, cocaine is in this car. So the atmosphere is really relaxed, but it's tense. As soon as I opened the door, I would check and I would smell for any weed. That weed smell, that real loud smelling weed, it permeates through your clothes. And the worst thing you want to do is you're driving and you get pulled over and the officer says he smells or she says they smell weed. You never want to get busted. So as soon as I go through the threshold of the door and I smelt it, I'd be like, I'm not coming in that house. I'm not touching nothing in that house. I'm not setting my bag in that house. I'll stay out in the garage.
BMF inconspicuously transported cocaine and money from Atlanta to California, using the fleet of limousines Jabari's company had in its inventory.
A stretch limousine would probably be around $70,000 to $80,000, on the high end, $90,000. Well, we would purchase that limousine, but we'd spend an extra $70,000 to $100,000 into building the compartments for the limousine. It had a bunch of pumps, actuators, and they would basically disassemble the whole car. They would gut the whole car and they would put in lines that looked exactly like the factory. Everything had to match. All of our cars looked, drove, and everything just like a factory limousine. Just ours were $70,000 to $100,000 more. And Meech's thing was, this vehicle is priceless. If it cost us $300,000, we don't care, because each time this driver gets pulled over and makes it away, it's priceless to us.
You would go look through the car like the dog would look through the car and look for anything left out of place, anything that shouldn't be there, and make sure it's not there before you send him out there alone.
I look for every irregularity in that limo, that car, that van, that truck, that RV, because I've got to think like a state trooper. I've got to think like a sheriff. I've got to think like a local yokel cop. I've got to think what irregularities would make them want to search more. So what I would do is I'd go back over and I'd make sure that I cleaned with ammonia. I would go in between the seats and I would taste crumbs. I would see if it was lint or if it was drugs. If it was drugs, I'd make sure we cleaned the car again all the way through. That little crumb outside of those sealed tight, airtight compartments, that crumb could send me to prison, lawyer fees, and we would lose the load, millions of dollars in cocaine or $2 or $3 million in cash. So we took a clinical approach to trafficking drugs because the dog smells the air of the cocaine, but if it's compressed and everything in there is airtight, they can't smell it. If they can't smell it, they can't get it or hit to where it's at. I took that very seriously. I took it seriously for my life, for my family's life, and more importantly, for the mob's money and for the mob's cocaine.
Twice a week, Jabari would drive out to California, 4,600 miles round trip, alone. Along the way, Jabari would make stops at other BMF locations in Alabama, Detroit, St. Louis, Texas, and Tennessee.
I'm always thinking about where the police are, where did somebody else get pulled over, am I speeding? I never go maybe a mile over the speed limit, but I never want to go too low under the speed limit because who drives the speed limit? So you got to stay right there, maybe a mile over. My mind goes into what I'm going to do with my money, how much fun I'm going to have with my money, role playing in my head if I get pulled over, how's my body language, how is my hand shaking, how do my facial twitches look when I'm talking to the officer. I role play out loud and rehearse everything like you're an actor.
Jabari would call me sometimes in the middle of the night in Los Angeles, and he would call me, I would wake up, and he'd just start talking. And I would know that meant he was driving and he was tired.
When you're in a car for 40 hours and you're going nonstop, your mind, it's like truckers say, your mind starts playing tricks on you. And late at night, like on the back of the semi-trucks, they're aluminum, the refrigerated semi-trucks, how I started seeing skeletons in the back of these aluminum pickup trucks, and on the ground it looked like phantoms just floating away. And out in New Mexico in the mountains, it's just so surreal. Your mind is going crazy. It's 4 in the morning and you can only listen to so many CDs. I started having passengers in the car and stuff, and I had one passenger at first, and then I'd snap out of it, and then maybe 2 weeks later I'd have 2 passengers. In New Mexico and Utah, it might be 100+ miles between one exit to the other. No food, no water, no rest stops, no bathrooms or anything. So the lines just start ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. Sometimes I would even call home and start arguing with a family member about something in the past, just so I could have some stimulation, not to go crazy. Sometimes I would call the crew, and Meech would, I don't care if it was 4 in the morning, he would always answer. He'd talk to me, real cool, real calm. He'd drop some jewels on me about what I was doing. And because I had everybody's money, I had everybody's drugs, so everybody was my best friend then.
He'll call you at 3, 4 in the morning, talking like it's 12 o'clock in the afternoon. And I talk to him because I know at that time he just needs somebody to talk to get through the moment he's going through.
Your mind goes crazy when you're out there. You lose part of yourself when you're out there on the road.
Each time Jabari drove, the threat of being pulled over and searched was never far from his mind.
One of the craziest stops I ever had, I was on the western portion of Oklahoma City, going out to California from Atlanta. I'm going the speed limit. I'm watching all of these police. I'm behind a tractor trailer, and I get over. I use my blinker, and woo! They pull me over. I say, okay, be cool. It's time to shine. Don't panic. Everything, your life depends on it. So I say, be cool, man. Be cool. On the low, I check my hand. Hand's not nervous. I look up. I'm not panicked. So they say, sir, can you step outside the car? Sure, no problem. Step outside the car. They were like, we were curious. How do these limos look on the inside? Can we look in? He said, look, not search. It's a difference. He said, look in. Sure, no problem. I slide in the car and I turn on the lights. I'm like, look, you've got the mirrored ceiling with the fiber optics like the solar system there. You've got the mood lights right here. And so, but I noticed them when I get in the middle, they feel on the seat. They feel on the seat to see if the drugs is in the seat. Drugs ain't in the seat, it's behind the seat. Then they feel on the back seat, the bench seat. They feel on that seat. So then I sit in the back, I'm showing them how what I'm really doing is I'm showing them that this stuff works. This isn't fake. So I'm showing them how the privacy glass goes up and down. And I'm like, look, well, maybe if you're in this limo and the driver is cool, you can look up at yourself when she's doing, and then I have them laughing. They're laughing, oh, ka, 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 ka. I'm having fun with the police. They felt the seats and they looked inside. Then they say, well, what does the trunk look like? Is it the same like my Crown Vic? I say, yeah, they're basically the same as a V8 4.6 engine. Everything's basically the same. Let me show you. So I pop the trunk. They go to the trunk and they pull back the little carpet to see if they can see anything back there. And then they feel the tire to see if the tire's too hard if I put some drugs in the tire. And then I'm like, look, I've got a lot of space, but I let them see my bag is open. I keep it like that on purpose, so they don't have any reason to look even further. They say, wait right here. So I'm thinking, oh, it's going down. What do they have me waiting for? The guy comes back, he's like, look, I'm gonna give you a warning this time. And I told him I was going to my friend's wedding. He said, look, you have fun at that wedding. He gives me a warning. You know what I do? I give him my card and tell him if you're ever in Atlanta, I sure will take you and your friends out. But the story didn't end there. When I get in New Mexico, I get a call. Pull over, pull over. I'm like, I'm not ready. What? I'm not ready to pull over. I'm thinking, man, I just got away from the police. I'm cool. He said, man, pull over. You got to go back to the spot. I pull over at this Holiday Inn. It's in Indian country. And then he's like, man, we forgot something. Forgot something. I'm thinking, I'm spun right now. What did they forget? I didn't check the car. What happened? But the police were in the car. So as soon as I go out, pulling the Holiday Inn, I open up the door and I see it. It's blending in, but I know what I'm looking for is 50 $100 bills. And I was showing this officer and that officer everything. They were focused on me and the lights and squeezing the seat and squeezing the bottom part of the seat and the back part of the seat. They missed it. My career would have been finished right there. $5,000 because they wanted to go to Magic City. We joke about it now, but it wasn't funny then.
Most times Jabari was stopped, he was able to talk his way from suspicion. But him eluding police only further boosted his confidence, and eventually his luck would run out.
The time I got stopped with $586,000, that was the 5th time I had been stopped. It's a bad night. I wasn't prepared. The house that I stopped at, it was taking them too long getting all of the money together. I had to wait for some hours. I didn't get any sleep. So I got on the road. I got about half hour outside of St. Louis in Fenton, Missouri, and I was crashing. It was probably maybe 2 or something in the morning. So I went to this Hampton Inn, and I talked to a little zit-faced guy, and I told him I wanted to keep my limo up front. I wanted to make sure it was safe. So I got about 4 hours sleep. When I came out, I saw the St. Louis County squad car. They were just circling. I thought something about it, but I thought maybe they're just circling because they always go through hotels to make sure nothing is happening. So when I drove out, I saw that he was kind of following me. I said, it's nothing. I've been stopped 4 times before. It's just police. And then as soon as I went down the entrance ramp and I got on the highway, the lights, the cherries were popping. And I pulled over. This wasn't no regular stop. I pulled over with squad car, conversion van, SUV, another car. It was probably like within 2 minutes. And I could see the cop was nervous when he asked me for my driver's license and my insurance. And I was like, this ain't, I knew it wasn't right. Police usually aren't the nervous ones, it's usually the driver. And when they pulled me over, it was instant. It got me out of the car, and they put me in this old, like, 1987 with, like, shag carpet van, and the guy's trying to profile me and ask me all these questions. Hey, buddy. He's, like, real nice, like, hey, man, that's a nice limo. Thank you, sir. He's like, where you going? I tell him where I'm going. Oh, yeah, really? Been out there, too. How long you gonna stay? So I'm playing along. I know what he's doing. He's like, so do you have any contraband or any large sums of money in the car or U.S. currency? I'm like, of course I got money in the car. I was like, I probably got about $300-400 on me. He's like, then I seen that cynical look. You know what I'm talking about. Everything changed. And I knew what it was then. I was like, I played along. I've got $300-400 in my pocket. I've got some money in the car. But what do you mean? So he's like, you don't have any large sums of U.S. currency? I said, no, sir. He's like, look, you can really make this easy on yourself right now, and I'll help you as much as I can. Help me? Help me with what? I don't understand what you're saying. So then I see a bunch of them walking towards the car. They don't look like police. They don't look like uniformed cop. They've got plain clothes on, hunting gear, everything. So then I see him go to the car. So the guy says, look, you ain't gonna try to run away from here, are you? I said, run away? Run away for what? So he gets out the van and he starts talking to the guys. He said, you wanna tell us where this money is at? I said, yeah, the money's in my pocket. What do you mean, what I wanted to tell you? There's some money in the car, but if you want $10, I'll give it to you now. He said, you're a fucking wise guy, huh? So then they're in the car for another half hour. I could see the limo just moving back and forth. One's in the front on this side, another one's in the front. They're in the trunk. They've got the doors open. So I'm like, Then the moment when the world fell out, when I saw him with that saw. When I saw him pulling it open, I stayed cool, but I knew it was going down. They got that saw out, and I could hear it. What they were doing, they couldn't get to the compartments. The car held up. They cut the car open. I seen one guy come out. He had like a trucker hat on, but some hunting thing on it. And he had the bag of money. He had the saw. He came out, banged on the door. Fuck you! Fuck you! I looked like something was wrong with him. Like, what? So the guy says, you sure you don't want to talk to me? I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. So they took me to St. Louis County Jail. They let me out. Now, if I was ever nervous, that was the time I was nervous. I didn't know what was gonna happen. Like, because I was free, but I had been busted, and I didn't know how the family would react towards me. And it was a different cold shoulder. It was just no communication. So I didn't know if somebody was coming to get at me, or I was retired, or I was left out to, I just didn't know anything. The funny thing about Meech is he didn't move, he didn't say anything, he just sat and waited. He's a smart guy, because fools rush in. And if I had snitched or if I was bad, they would already been at him. They just showed up at my house and picked me up. Drove around the city, switched cars, did us all secret squirrel stuff. They got me to the house, and I didn't know what it was. Meech was so cool. He said, my nigga, plans done changed.
Less than 4 weeks after being stopped, Jabari was back on the road. Instead of using limos this time, Big Meech made the switch to luxury RVs because they could hold a larger quantity of cocaine.
I was in this for life. It wasn't, I'm gonna make 10,000, I'm gonna get out. I'm gonna make 100,000, I'm gonna get out. It was this life, prison, death. Wasn't nothing else.
In the RV, Jabari made 5 successful round trips to LA, and with that, Jabari got back in the good graces of the organization and his confidence returned. Once he was released from his first arrest, he proposed to his longtime girlfriend and was 1 trip away from retirement.
Easter Sunday, April 11th. Easter Sunday. And I had plans to go home and spend Easter Sunday, my son's first Easter Sunday. He was on this earth. I was like 100-something miles outside of St. Louis in a little town called Rolla, Missouri, Phelps County, when I got pulled over by a Phelps County police officer.
The next week, I was just shocked that he was back in the car that fast. Like, really, maybe back in the car at all, but definitely that fast. I believe I talked to him at some point between those times. I remember thinking when I was talking to him that he didn't sound like he was done. And he didn't sound like it was like huge, like it was almost like no problem, it's all good. It was like, almost like it was a mistake. Like, oh yeah, you know, that was kind of the tone he was talking to me. He didn't say those words, but it was kind of like, you know, it's good, I'm cool. You know, and I was like, wow, that's like, I wouldn't have been cool.
I'm coming down the hill and then I see this local cop. He pulls out. For some reason, I just didn't think he was pulling out for me. So he pulls me over. When he pulls me over, he asks if he can step in. I said, sure, you can step in, no problem. He says, well, better yet, you come out, no problem. I give him my ID, give him the registration. It's a Tennessee ID. He takes it back, everything checks out. While I'm inside of we used to have the chirps, so the Nextels. So I chirp everybody and let them know what mile marker I'm at. I just got pulled over, but I'm being cool. So he asked me to come to the car. Then he starts talking. Same good cop thing. Oh man, yeah, you know, just recently I pulled over Britney Spears' driver to her bus and he had 1,500 pounds of weed. I'm like, really? He's got me in his car. He's like, you like to party? I was like, yeah, of course I like to go out to the clubs. He's like, no, do you like to party? I said, what kind of party do you mean? He's a real greaseball. So he's asking me his questions. I mean, like, what do you mean? He's like, you know. And he's talking about, for a lot of people, partying means, do you like to sniff coke? I was like, no. He's like, do you have any of that stuff in there? I was like, no, sir. He starts asking more questions, and he asked me if he can search the vehicle. I said, no, sir, that's my personal, that's my home right there. This has been my dream. I'm traveling cross country. He says, so you're not giving me permission? I said, no, sir. I was like, this is my home. So he calls up another car, and I could see it's a guy. He looks like he's ex-military the way his hat is pulled down on his head. And he's got a dog, and the dog is cranked up. He's smacking the dog around and getting the dog. They get the dog hype. So the dog goes around, and the dog sits and barks or something. Then he goes on there, and he finds the drugs. He's like, yeah, you should have told me the truth. You should have told me the truth. So I'm gonna tell you I've got 100+ kilos of cocaine in the vehicle. So then they take me down to the station. The name was Kenneth Torrey Collins. That was me. And that was my story, and I was sticking to it. He sits me down, he says, so you're gonna take me to whoever you were gonna take those drugs to. I lean back in the chair, lean down. I say, if you wanna take me back to the cell, you can. I don't know anything about anything. He said, so you're a wise fucking guy. I said, no, sir. I just don't have anything to say. He says, okay. He gets a pen, gets a white piece of paper, and he draws He writes 360, scratches it and draws a line with an arrow to 0. He said, you're gonna get between 360 months. He said, and that's 30 years in prison, just so you know if you can't count. Between 0 months. You sure you don't want to help yourself? I don't know what you're talking about, officer. You can take me back to my cell. I was sleeping pretty good. So that's your story and you're sticking to it. Then, about an hour later, you can tell the respect that people give to other people to know who's the boss. Then the federales came.
Everybody's mindset was get him out. That's the main thing everybody worries about when anything happens, because it happens. I mean, it's just all a part of what we're doing. So the main thing is the driver. Get the driver. I mean, everything else is, it's gone anyway. So the main thing is get what you can get, and that's the driver.
My heart dropped. For the amount he had got, we thought it was over for everybody. But, you can't really say what a man gonna do in that situation.
When I found out that he had been arrested, and I was very disappointed, but I thought he can overcome this too, because I know he has the heart to do that.
After I got to the county jail, back in those days, people still had home phones. And I never forgot a friend of mine's home phone number. And I called them, and I didn't give them specifics, but I said, hey, I've been busted, man, and I need a lawyer.
And I just remember saying, call Scott Rosenblum, because I remember getting out of bed, and I was like, call Scott Rosenblum, make sure.
Maybe the next day, after I was in the county jail, it seemed like Scott Rosenblum, or Scott Free Rosenblum, was like a giant.
I got a call probably at night. It was probably on my cell phone. Somebody reached out, I think probably for him, because he was incarcerated. And I met Jabari, started working on the case. It was pretty evident to me. I sort of knew the players because he was stopped at a location that I was familiar with. And obviously, it was noteworthy because the allegation was that there was a significant amount of narcotics contained within the vehicle.
He came in there like Matlock. He was like bigger than life. He came in there and was like, hey man, how you doing?
I was surprised because he seemed not who I would have connected to be involved in that organization. He seemed to be an athlete, well-spoken, soft-spoken, sort of a nerd.
He sure was happy after I had sat and rotted in the county jail. And he just exuded confidence, and he was just like, hey, so what's going on? You all right? He's like, I'm Scott Rosenblum. You heard of me? And so, because in every county jail in St. Louis, this guy is the biggest lawyer, the biggest celebrity, super attorney, the biggest thing in the Midwest. And he's like, yeah. I was like, yeah, I heard of you. He says, so I'm your lawyer. He's like, a lot of fucking drugs, huh? Did you talk to anybody? I said, no, don't talk to anybody. Not anybody on the phone, anybody there. They got jailhouse snitches, everything. Don't talk to anybody. Did you talk to anybody? I said, no. Yeah, I read the report. I know you did. Good job, buddy. Look, once you get out, we'll be in touch. I was like, I'm thinking in my head, stay cool. I'm gonna get out. I just got caught with $586,000. And then I had a fake ID and 103 kilos of cocaine. I didn't think it was possible. And next thing you know, 2 days later, I was out. We met a block away from his office in Clayton, Missouri. And we went to Morton's for dinner. And I'll never forget, he was cool as the fan. He's like, yeah, we're gonna work this case. You wanna fight? I said, we can do it. He said, you know I beat him before. He said, you know I beat this cop on a 1-ton weed case. It's like, what? He's like, yeah, I beat the cop. Yeah, I beat him before. He was just so confident, and it wasn't even arrogance. This guy was like, he just told me he beat the feds on a 1-ton weed case, and it was the same cop. I felt like, man, I might could beat this. I won't have to go to prison. So he's like, yeah, just Just go home, get everything together, and I'll give you a call. It was just like that.
After Jabari gets released, he's planning a wedding. And I'm reading in the newspaper about him having all these drugs at the time they didn't say how much, they just said over $1 million worth of cocaine.
103 kilograms of cocaine in what I believe was a Maserati mobile home.
Then he asked me to be in his wedding, and I'm like, I couldn't, he's my friend, so I can't say no. But in my gut, I want to say no because I'm like, why is he alive? And Jabari explained to me that his position was not jeopardizing their position, whoever there is. And we didn't talk about who there was, but he just said his position is not jeopardizing them, which means to me, in layman's terms, he's not snitching. Okay, I understand that. And so because I understand he's not snitching, I felt safer being in his wedding.
We're preparing for the wedding, flowers, celloists, food, everything else, and she gets the call. I knew her heart had to drop. When I got out, it was just elation. She had probably cried multiple times every day that I was in jail waiting for bond. But when I got out, she was just all in. At that time, she was all in for me.
The only strategy we had was to attack the stop because it would be hard to persuade a jury that you didn't realize that there was 103 kilograms of cocaine in your mobile home. So absent that, we had to attack the stop, the probable cause of the stop, which is what we did. I was familiar, it was in Phelps County, and there was a particular, I think it was called the Sugar Tree exit. And, you know, it was just a local sheriff that would set up like a trap there. So I was sort of familiar with his techniques, and I knew that he had some issues, and he drove around with his pet dog, who was not qualified to make hits.
My first sentence was interstate trafficking in aid of racketeering in the Eastern District of Missouri, St. Louis, Missouri.
Jurisdictionally, they can sometimes get a couple shots at the apple, so to speak. So what happened was, because of the amount of the cocaine, and this was before 2006, so the guidelines were mandatory. So what that means is 103 kilograms would equal X amount under the sentencing guidelines, and unless you snitched, you were going to get that amount. I think his guidelines would have placed him his guidelines probably would have placed him right around 15 years. Where this hearing took place is we were able to expand what was called the detention hearing, where they were trying to hold him without bond. And we had sort of like a mini motion to suppress. So the judge recognized some of the issues and suggested to the government that they're going to have issues on a motion to suppress. At that point, the government offered him, I think, what's called a phone count. And a phone count is significant because instead of 15, your maximum sentence would be 48 months. And because there was no weapon, you qualify for the drug program, so eventually, you know, that could lop off enough where you wind up getting out in like 2 years. Unfortunately, unbeknownst to us, he was involved in another prosecution out of Detroit, where they could prosecute him for other conduct involved with BMF. They could not prosecute him for this particular 103 keys because that was litigated already. That was essentially suppressed. So because of that, he was, you know, he got I think a significantly reduced sentence on that too. Again, without cooperating.
It was like, it was nothing for him. So when the news story broke, it broke for like 5 days. It was Kenneth Torrey Collins gets caught in $1 million RV outside of St. Louis. It wasn't Jabari Hayes. And then 3 days later, it came out, Jabari Hayes, this, that. And the way my picture was taken, I took it like this so it didn't look like me. Plus I had a beard and everything else. So people didn't think it, or they didn't want to believe it was me. And so my cousin asked me, she said, would you do it again? And I still was ignorant and arrogant. I told her, of course I would, you know? why wouldn't I do it again? What do you mean, why wouldn't I do it again? So I wish I would have lied to her then. The day I was sentenced was November 19th, 2004. And I had been out on house incarceration, house arrest. So I went to the plea hearing. They didn't remand me, lock me up then. And when I went to sentencing, I thought that they would let me self-surrender. Like, okay, you've been sentenced to this amount of time and we'll send you a certified mail saying that you're gonna go to this prison on this date at this time, because I had been out for 7 months.
And I remember having a conversation with him prior to going. Jabari was expecting to be sentenced, go home, and wait probably 30 to 45 days before reporting. But what happened was, on that day, Jabari was sentenced, and surprise to the entire crowd, he had to go that day. So he didn't walk back out.
Me personally, I didn't think he'd snitch, because, I mean, during the time me and him, we really got to know each other and really got to understand what we was doing and the consequences that came with it.
It was obviously a criminal enterprise. But what was unusual about it is the people involved were not your typical gangbangers. They actually were very bright entrepreneurs that, had they applied their brains and their effort to something legal, I'm sure they would have been just as successful.
After Jabari got picked up and arrested, I remember telling my wife that he had visited me in Los Angeles, and I went to a house with him, you know, compound gate, you know, guys in there, a bunch of guys with white t-shirts and playing video games, smoking weed. There's pistols all on the counters. And I remember thinking after he went to jail, like, I got mad at myself. I was like, because that house got raided at some point. And I remember thinking to myself, if it had got raided the day I was there, I would have went to jail. I would have went to jail, and I don't know if I had enough money to prove that I was innocent. And no one would have cared. Like, as far as prosecutors, police, they would have been happy to send me to jail. It became serious when he got arrested. I was like, okay, this is really not a game.
And I thought I was only gonna do 22 months with good time, halfway house, and the sentence reduction for boot camp because I was a first-time offender. I didn't have a gun charge. I had never been in trouble before. I had never been to jail or prison before. So I thought, man, 22 months, I could do that on my head. It's nothing. And I can get in shape in the process. But when I got there, it was totally different. I didn't do 22 months. When I first was busted, I had communication with Meech and almost everybody else in the crew. As time went on, after I went to prison, I had less communication, but for us, our bond is so strong with so many people that are in BMF, we don't have to communicate a lot because we know where each other is and we know how we're cut.
I was extremely surprised. That was, that'd be like saying the valedictorian went to prison. You know what I'm saying? 'Cause that's who he was to me. He was the pure one out of all. He was the good one out of all of us. But I knew he could do wrong, and I knew he could do something crazy. You know, like I said, he wasn't a punk to me, but to me, he was a pure one. And when I heard that, I couldn't believe it. You know, I was just like, wow, him out of all of us, Jabari.
When I heard it, I was like, and they told me the details there, in the details of it, I was like, wow. So is he okay? You know. He said he's fine. He's all right. You know. I said, what did they do? I mean, I wanted to know. I really wanted to know the details, and on how Jabari got caught.
But I got mad at him. Like, well, how could he? You know, he got a baby and this, that. Like forgetting that I knew all this time. Now I'm just like, you know, how? And really because he had gotten caught like so recently. Like, how could he be that stupid? So I went to there, too. In my mind, I'm getting angry. You know, like, you know, this is, you know, I'm mad at him. Probably, you know, again, in retrospect, I'm looking at it and I'm probably mad because I'm thinking I'm about to lose my friend forever.
So I tried to tell him to the best of my ability how to jail, how to stay alive, and how to stay out of trouble. I mean, yeah, I knew what he was getting, and I knew the facts of it, and we just had to deal with it.
Oklahoma City Transfer Center, OTC. And I was so happy to be in a clean place. It was cold. I was on a steel bunk. The room was real dark, but each room had a camera in it. So they would never let the lights go all the way out. And the guy I was in the cell with was he was back on a violation. I didn't want to ask too many questions. I definitely wasn't going to say anything about me, my case, or anything else. And I couldn't sleep, and it felt like the minute I got to sleep, it was dung, 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 bang. The cell opened up, and the guy hit the bunk like, yo, it's time to eat, man. I didn't want nothing to eat. I didn't want to come out the cell. I just wanted to get some sleep. He's like, nah, man, you got to eat, man. But once I got my wits about me, I went straight to the phone, and I didn't care. The collect calls was $17 for 15 minutes. I didn't care, nor did my wife care. And she was trying to stay strong. First 15 minutes, she cried maybe 1 minute of it and said, call me right back, call me right back. We probably charged, I don't know, almost $75 just in calls the first day. And the second night, it really hit me that I'm in jail. This is a hard bunk, and this is real, and I'm gonna be here for a while.
We did communicate. I think maybe he wrote me some letters. I read his book. He sent me his book. I read it, and we talked sometimes. You know, not a ton, but we did talk.
We didn't do no communicating. He did his time, he get it over with. And I do my time, I get it over with. He didn't communicate with me in my first bid or either too much in my second one. But me and my brother, our relationship is not as strained because of that. It was understanding.
When Jabari was away, we talked, let's say quarterly. I'm not really, there's no, definite time, but we talk often.
I've got a theory. When you first go to prison, you've got all of these friends. You've got this circle that's 100%. Then after that first year, goes down to like 75, 50%. Then after that second, third year, out of sight, out of mind, it goes down to like 1/4%. And that's your nucleus of people that are in your life. And because when you first go in, everybody's still like, oh, we miss them, this, that. And then you get all of these letters, you get all of these cards, keep your head up, stay strong, come on, man, keep it real, we appreciate you. And then it starts shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, and you're left with this core, the real people that need to be in your life. My 11th month in prison, and I was having such a good time. The federal government, the Eastern District of Michigan, indicted me on a conspiracy to distribute 5 or more kilos of cocaine and the conspiracy to launder monetary instruments, money laundering. So I had 2 counts after I was 11 months in prison up in the Eastern District of Missouri. You learn real quick. You keep your eyes straight ahead. You don't talk to anybody because you don't want nobody to say nothing to you, and you keep it moving. I'm never gonna romanticize prison. It was not the place to be. I don't wish it on anybody, but I was blessed to have prison.
Jabari and I, when we would talk, he would talk about the glamorous part of what he was living when he was out. Like, when I come home, I'm gonna have this car. When I still got that watch. And I got this watch over here, and it was that material stuff, that stuff that he had pride in.
My first 10 months when I was in prison, I thought, when I get back out, I'll get a luxury car rental business, and I'll just count money, and I'll probably sell some weed or something like that. I had no plan. I still had plans to sell drugs, to be involved with drugs some type of way. Like I never thought that I would be away from BMF. I never thought that I would ever get out. I would ever be totally free. And not that it was a bad thing. I didn't think it was a bad thing either. I just thought, this is my life. This is what I chose, and I can never leave this.
You never leave this. It's a death. So there's nothing to leave. I'm just, I'm not around them, but I'm still. And so is he, whether you want to believe it or not. We are still with the family, so we'll never stop that.
It took me literally my 3rd year in prison to say that I wasn't gonna sell drugs, I wasn't gonna be around drugs, I wasn't gonna do anything to get me back in prison. It literally took me 3 years to actually say it and believe it. That's when I started to turn my life around. It was one of the first times I ever used my college degree. I started teaching classes. I would host slam poetry in prison. I would host talent shows. I participated in plays. I started singing in the choir. I started attending church regularly.
But I think at some point in that vacation, he realized that stuff didn't mean as much to him as his son did. That stuff didn't mean as much as to him as seeing his father again. At the time, that stuff didn't mean as much to him as seeing his wife again. And so I think as when he got closer to the end date, he started to cherish that family time as opposed to that material crap he acquired while he was in that world. Well, at first, I actually thought, if somebody asked me, it's like, what do you think he's gonna do when he come home? I go, he's gonna go right back to the same business he was in prior. And to see him today is amazing because I'm telling you, I thought he was gonna be a drug dealer again.
That's when I really decided that I was gonna come home, I was gonna be the best man of God I could be, and the best father I could be.
Upon entering prison and after paying for his defense, Jabari reportedly gave over $200,000 in cash to his wife for living expenses for the next 7 years.
Probably after my 18th month, I was like, so where's the money at? Like, what's up? Because my mind is like, where's the money at? She's like, we don't have any money. I was just like, oh. When she said that, it took we don't have any money. Like, how could we not have any money? Like, what did you do with it? Like, you don't have any money? And that's when the visits started from every weekend to once a weekend to once every 2 weeks to once every 3 weeks to once a month. Then it went from talking every day, every other day, once a week. So when the money went, she went too. Charge it to the game. It's part of the life. After everybody was locked up and there was no more BMF members that were free, I was in shock. I just couldn't believe it, because we really thought that it would never end, that we were really above the law and we were really invincible. And we weren't. We were all in prison and we were scattered across the country.
On May 27, 2010, Jabari was released from the Federal Bureau of Prisons in Atlanta, Georgia. No longer prisoner 30957-044, Jabari walked out on probation after serving 5 years, 6 months, and 19 days.
When he was released, going into the halfway house, I want to say I was probably one of the first persons he contacted, if I'm not mistaken. Because I remember him calling me and say, "Hey, Dumas, what's crack-a-lacking?" Saying something of that nature. And I was like, "Oh, man, what's up, brother?" And we talking. He was like, "Yo, I'm going to be home. blah, blah, blah. I'm going to come by because I got this time. When's a good time to come see you all?" And, and that's the opportunity when outside of me telling Coach Hill that he got locked up, that was the second time I talked to Coach Hill about Jabari him being released. And Coach Hill being whom he is, he says, thank God. Is he okay? Do we need anything? And I was like, well, Coach, he's gonna come by. He's gonna come by. He was like, okay.
I knew a guy who owned the body shop, and I had plans to go to work for him. And so I put everything in place and in motion so that as soon as I got out, I'd have a job.
I knew Jabari was a member of the BMF and didn't really know or understand what BMF stood for. He was just always a good person to me. Drug traffickers usually seem to be somewhat hood type of people, rough, gangster kind of people, which was totally different than Jabari Hayes was. He was a regular, nice family type of guy, never having weapons or anything to do or say mean about anybody. He was absolutely not what would be stereotyped as a drug dealer or trafficker kind of person.
I was fortunate that my father moved back to Atlanta so I had a place to live. And I said, whatever I did, I don't care. I used to always say, I don't care if I'm under a bridge. As long as I've got my son and I could live under a bridge, but I'm not going back to prison.
I found him a job at a body shop, and the job wasn't working out. Wasn't Jabari's deal, why it wasn't working out. And I said, hey, Jabari, why don't you and I do a body shop together? And he said, yeah, let's try doing a body shop, and let's do all makes and models. And that's what we did some 4 or 5 years ago.
Still on house arrest but employed, Jabari fought for custody of his only child, the child he rarely saw during his last years in prison. After numerous court battles, the judge awarded Jabari with primary custody of his son with child support. As he planned, Jabari was putting his life back on the path of the straight and narrow.
All we did was give Dap, big brother hug. We cracked jokes on a little piece that was around his ankle. I mean, that's how we did. Crack jokes about that. I got this, hey, I'm still locked up, but we find humor in distress. Understand? And there was no love lost. I mean, to me, it's still the same Jabari with now he has another experience in this that he can talk about.
That when I seen Jabari, I was very happy to see him, that he wasn't destroyed while he was doing, his time. Like I can see that the purpose that God had for Jabari had been learned while he was in there. And I was happy for that Jabari was still strong and still had the smile. If you look at Jabari there's always a smile.
It was really a homecoming for me. And that feeling I'll never forget. It's probably one of the greatest moments of my life because it affirmed that I made some wrong choices, but people still loved me unconditionally. And it was an incredible time.
Now I've seen what I believe to be true. You know what I'm saying? He is a good guy who was a badass, I mean, he showed that he will take that step and he can go gangster, and then he showed that he's got to take that step to be a real man and take accountability and responsibility for what he's done and straighten his life out.
People may not know that there was something inside of him searching for meaning in his life and yearning to make something of himself that was positive. He always had a good heart. He cared about other people, and I don't think most people recognize that.
It doesn't surprise me the life that he has now. So when I see him now, I'm proud of him that he was able to take that small piece of his life and make that into springboard into that being a successful father, a successful businessman, so it's amazing.
Jabari, he was a man. He went and served his time, and he came back, and he's very helpful in his community, and he comes back over and and speak to the young brothers here and let them know that guess what, you may think something is easy. There's easy money out there, but there's nothing easy about making money. when you're doing it the wrong way.
They label us as this notorious gang, like we were just out there just wrongfully just doing bank robbery and killing and all this here, but there ain't nothing like us. All we did is just made a little money and celebrated the good life.
Could I say anything bad about BMF? Yeah, I could say something bad. We stopped going. We don't exist no more. Meech is in jail. They prosecuted us. That's what I could say bad. About the crew, no, I can't say anything bad about them. Why would I? I missed them. I love them.
Meech is probably, and still is, one of the smartest people I know, one of the sharpest businessmen that I know. We were just in a different business, a not legal business.
Eventually, law enforcement agencies from 5 different states arrested and indicted, tried, and convicted over 300 members and associates affiliated with the organization known as Black Mafia Family.
It was different people who started telling. That's what really got them. Once they got a snitch, they basically got inside the organization. So all they did was have a story already that they had in their mind, and once you got a snitch, just make him tell my story, and there you go. You got an indictment after that.
If I had to say any last words, I'd say for all of those kids that live in crack apartments, heroin houses, meth trailers, or their parents are alcoholics, if I can make it, I know you can. Pain is pain, whether it's Arkadelphia, Arkansas, Willacoochee, Georgia, Brooklyn, New York, San Francisco, California. If your parents are on drugs, your parents are on drugs. It's all relative. Like, the hurt is there. I know you're hurt. I've been there. I know how it feels. But if I can do it, I know you can. Like, you can go to college. You can become a plumber. You can become the president. It's whatever you want to do, you can do it. You've got to make a decision to say, I'm going to be different. I don't want that life for myself. You're going to have to put in a whole lot of work, but I think you can do it. And for the parents, like, you've got a lot of wreckage. You've hurt a lot of people. Let your past be your past. Blessed is the man and woman who's been corrected. Like, you can change your life. You're gonna have to work hard, and maybe your kids right now or the next year or the next 5 years, they may not wanna be in your life, but hopefully one day they will. But they've seen you say you're gonna change so much, but you've gotta be about it. And I love my mother. I never stopped loving my mother. But she's worked hard. She's got 18 years clean and sober from the evils of alcohol and drugs. She was homeless for 10 years. My mother can be homeless for 10 years. Every minute, second of her life was addicted to crack cocaine and alcohol. And if she can have 18 years clean and have a sponsor and sponsees and go to women's conferences and all of these things, you can too. You know, just several decades ago, I was a thief with my mother. I was living in a crack house. I thought my future was only gonna be that. I made some good decisions and I made some bad ones. You know, here I am today. I've got acronym agency groups for the government that put people in prison as customers, magistrate judges, county judges, city judges, police departments, sheriffs, everything. And you can change your life. And God never left you, you know? God was always with you. He just had to put you through some things to get someplace, you know? So at the end of the day, if I can do it, I know you can too.
I never felt there was no more BMF. I just felt that Meech and T got locked up and the show must go on. I mean, it's play your part till you have no part to play.